On
This year's
April 5th,
election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Hartmann. Okay, the winners and losers in the tax bill. And again, my deepest apologies to our affiliates and everybody. I did not have my microphone plugged in this morning. This is my fault. And that we blew up the first 10 minutes of our show. My error entirely. I apologize. We are back and everything is working fine. President Trump, so the New York Times, Jesse Drucker and Alan Rappaport wrote a great piece for the New York Times back day before yesterday. Winners and losers in the tax bill. Now, keep in mind, this tax bill, this Republican tax scam is about 1,000 pages long and was almost entirely written by either lobbyists or former lobbyists. And so, you know, it's going to take us a while to figure out exactly what other little time bombs they've built into this thing. But there's a lot of it. By the way, breaking news, an Amtrak derailed between Washington State and Portland, Oregon. This is not a good thing. And another example of the kind of crisis that we have here in the United States as a result of our infrastructure problems. We are behind the rest of the developed world in having functional infrastructure. It's insane. So anyhow, the biggest winner in the Trump bill, in the GOP tax scam, is commercial real estate developers. You know, like the guy in the White House, just like, you know, the biggest winner back in 2002 for invading Iraq and Afghanistan was the oil industry, right? What a surprise. You had an oil CEO in the White House. You had an oil CEO as vice president. Today we've got a commercial real estate CEO in the White House. And guess what? Pass-through income, money you make on real estate, suddenly it's going to be taxed at 29% rather than 39%. Isn't that sweet? Donald Trump is going to make out like a frigging bandit. And by the way, they go on to add in how this is going to help both Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. Real estate also avoided new limits on interest deductions and retained its ability to defer taxes on the exchange of similar kinds of properties. In other words, if you sell a property and you make a huge profit and you buy a new property with that money, you don't have to pay any taxes. How cool is that, right? You can't do that with with stocks. Try doing that with your retirement account. Good luck. Unless, of course, it's a 401k, but still you're going to have to pay money on that eventually. Real estate? Nah, not so much. And who else wins? The big corporations win. Google, Facebook, Apple, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer. These companies are sitting on $3 trillion worth of offshore money. $3 friggin' trillion. And this is going to come back to them, and they're going to have to pay 8% to 15%, depending on whether they're bringing back assets or cash. And in fact, we're going to this so-called territorial tax system, which means that if you're making money overseas, you no longer have to pay U.S. taxes on it. So in the future, these companies can simply keep their manufacturing overseas, keep their profits overseas, and hey, it's Fat City. They can bring that money back without taxes all they want. Okay, who else wins? So we've got big corporations, we got real estate developers, multimillionaires who are, you know, well, actually, it's not even the elderly. Young people who are members of the Lucky Sperm Club or the Lucky Ovum Club, not to be sexist. Young people who have elderly relatives who have estates worth well over $11 million. They're going to benefit from this because, you know, they no longer have to work for a living, right? If your parents are rich enough, you don't have to work for a living. You know, you get $11 million, zoom, just like that if your parents croak. And what'd you do to earn that? Oh, nothing? Oh, no problem. As long as you make contributions to the Republican Party, they're going to take care of you. So young people who have multimillionaire elders or parents, young people, you know, maybe what, 1,000 people a year, maybe, more likely a few hundred a year, who will inherit large estates worth more than $11 million. Not because they worked. Keep in mind, if these young members of wealthy families had actually worked, they could get rich themselves by being paid well. I mean, even if you know, Chauncey only shows up one day a week at his mother or father's fancy schmancy real estate development office, billionaire or whatever it may be, just show up one day a week. We can still cut you a paycheck of $1 million a week. You can make your money the old-fashioned way and pay the old-fashioned taxes on it. But if instead you're just going to spend your days sitting by the pool, you know, having the pool attendant peel your grapes for you as you're waiting for the dividend check to arrive in the mail, if that's what you're going to do and you're waiting for, you know, dad, mom, grandpa, grandma to kick off, hey, we've got a surprise for you. We've got a big benefit for you. Your taxes are going to go down. They're going to go down to zero eventually when you become rich. Isn't that sweet? And you didn't do anything to deserve it. But working people, your taxes are going to go up.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we haven't even gotten to carried interest. Carried interest is mind-boggling. When you hear the story of where this came from, it's going to make your head explode. Remember a couple decades ago when National Lampoon ran the cover story the cover that had the picture of the cute little dog and the guy with a big gun, and it said, you know, buy this magazine or we shoot the dog? I'm not going to make crazy threats like that today. This is our new dog who has yet to be named. And she says, please help Free Speech TV. Right? Right? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Please help Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV needs you. Here we are. This is, you know, we went through 3 weeks and we're still 35,000 or thereabouts short. And so we're going to try and raise it as quick as we can this week, and really could use your help right now. 877-378-8669. We really need to close this thing out. We need to pay the bills. We need to get this stuff nailed down. Pick the cliche of your choice. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen today. And if not today, then tomorrow or the next day. But let's try to make this as short as possible. I'd love to get back to reading book reports, and I'm sure that you would like to get back to watching them or hearing them. So please, if you haven't contributed to Free Speech TV yet, and I know the vast majority of our viewers have not, because it's just the nature of, you know, nonprofit radio and television, whether it's free speech or whether it's NPR or something else, except the Free Speech TV doesn't go begging to big corporations like NPR does. But in any case, if you'd like to make a contribution, if you can afford to make a contribution, and if you haven't already donated to Free Speech TV, or if you have, but you can afford a little bit more, please consider calling right now, 877-378-8669. We have to hit this budget for the year's end. It is the end of the year. It is tax deductible. You might want to talk to your tax people or your spouse or whatever, you know, whoever's, you know, organizing that kind of stuff with you, for you, about whether this is an appropriate thing to do, and if so, to what extent. But this is a great time of year to be making contributions. You know, as we kind of settle in and look at the past year and say, okay, well, you know, how much of this should I set aside to be tax deductible? How much should we give to charity? What kind of charities do we want to support? There's a lot of good ones out there. Free Speech TV is one of the best. Free Speech TV makes such efficient use of your contributions. With a $30 gift, you get a Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $60 gift, you get the Free Speech TV 16-month catalog in addition to the bumper sticker. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Ann Jones's new book, Beyond the Messy Truth. A brilliant look at the economic situation in America. With a $240 gift, or $20 a month for a year, you get Claudia Rankine's book, Citizen. And with a $360 gift, or $30 a month for a year, you get all of that stuff: the bumper sticker, the calendar, the copy of Van Jones's book, Claudia Rankine's book, and my book, Unequal Protection. With a $1,000 contribution, come to Portland or Washington, D.C., although 9 times out of 10 we're going to be in Portland. And let's get together. Let's have a nice meal. So that's it. It's quite straightforward. Free Speech TV needs your help. Free Speech TV exists, operates, continues to operate as a result of your help. This is a network that was built by its viewers. And if you're a viewer of Free Speech TV, if you find value in this program, if you find value in other programs, your contribution is also essentially a way of voting, a way of registering your approval. And one of the things that Free Speech TV looks at as they look at their lineup of programs is, because they're not a big commercial corporate network that subscribes to Nielsen ratings and things, which costs probably more than Free Speech TV pays on anybody's salary. They're not doing that. Instead, the metric that they use to determine, which shows are successful and which ones aren't is who's contributing. And it's a pretty good metric because it gives you instant feedback on, okay, these people are contributing to this show, so we better keep this show on the air. And these people aren't contributing to this show, and so, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth the time, effort, and money to keep this show on the air if we're not making the contributions? Now, I think with our show, we're doing okay. I don't think that our show is at any risk with Free Speech TV. But, look at the entire line. And, of course, when you call and make your contribution, even during our show, you can say, this is for all of Free Speech TV. I love all your programming. Or you can say, hey, that show, I like better than this one. Or this one, they actually take notes from your call. Now, just like when you're calling a member of Congress, don't call with a list of 6 things, because, that's a lot to ask somebody to write down, or even 2 things. But if you've got one good solid suggestion or complaint or critique or praise, everybody loves praise. Free Speech TV would love to hear from you. Here's your chance, 877-378-8669. Call them now and make a contribution and become part of this family. Become part of the Free Speech TV network. Become part of the Free Speech TV family. We need your help. Free Speech TV needs your help. The programs on Free Speech TV need your help. Please, call now, 877-378-8669. Let's get this fund drive over as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you so much. Back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And we were talking about the winners and losers in the tax bill, which is pretty breathtaking. Extremely breathtaking, actually. The big winners: President Trump and his family, number one, and anyone else who is a real estate developer worth more than $100 million. Big corporations that get to bring in $3 trillion of offshore money at an 8% tax rate, and will never have to pay that tax again. Multimillionaire children who are set to inherit, never having to work for that money, the Paris Hiltons of the world. Private equity managers, this is an amazing thing, carried interest. Back, and tip of the hat to Stephanie Rule at MSNBC. I learned this from her this morning. I'm not sure where she got it, and I probably should have seen it there, but I didn't know the history of carried interest. Back in the 1600s, the Dutch trading companies which were imitated, by the way, with the East India Company. In December of 1801, when Queen Elizabeth I signed the charter for the East India Company. I didn't get this from Stephanie Rule. This is stuff I've known for years. But in 1601, when Queen Elizabeth started the East India Company, it was in an attempt to imitate what the Dutch were doing. And the way the Dutch had set up their trading corporations was if a captain was bringing your cargo from Rotterdam to London, for example, the captain charged 20% of the value of the cargo to do that, to carry the things that you are interested in to their destination. You could argue that those captains were, in a way, kind of pirates. So when Mitt Romney's industry got invented, they said, okay, we're going to carry the assets and debt of a company into another company, so we get to skim 20% off the top and call it carried interest. And we're going to buy some legislators who are going to write a tax provision that says we only have to pay 20% income tax on this rather than the 39% that everybody else pays. So you literally have people on Wall Street who are making $1 billion or $2 billion a year. There was a dozen of them last year who made over $1 billion a year. And they're paying a maximum income tax rate of 20% on it because of this so-called carried interest thing, which is just, the reinvention of something from the 16th century. It's bizarre. Who else is going to win as a result of this so-called tax scam or the so-called tax bill? Private schools and the people who can afford them. It used to be that you could set aside, up to $10,000 a year in your 529. This is one of these new tax-deferred programs in order to pay for your kids' college, or your own college for that matter. Now you can use those 529s to pay for private schools and religious schools, primary schools. So if you want to send your kid to a Jesuit school, or you want to send your kid to a Scientology school, or you want to send your kid to a Muslim school, don't tell Donald Trump, you get up to $10,000 a year that you can cut off your taxes for doing that. Senator Rob Portman of Ohio made sure that the liquor business gets a healthy tax cut. The new addition to the pass-through provision, it's not just going to be for real estate people. They had to expand it a little bit because, the president is a real estate guy. You've got to give this to a few more people. And so they expanded it to engineers and architects. So if you're in the real estate business and you own your own company, you got a sweet little tax scam. If you're in the accounting business and you own your own company, you get a sweet little tax scam. And maybe this is to keep CPAs from telling us the truth about what's really in the tax bill. And if you're an architect, well, that's kind of tied to the construction business. You get a sweet little tax scam. And tax accountants and lawyers, of course, are going to make out like bandits because this is not reducing the complexity of the tax laws. This is radically increasing the complexity of the tax laws. Now, who are the losers? According to the New York Times, according to this piece put together by Jesse Drucker and Alan Rappaport, anybody who wants to buy health insurance, you're going to see your prices go up because they're doing away with certain Obamacare subsidies. And specifically, they're doing away with the individual mandate, which means that healthier people are going to drop their health insurance. Why pay for it when the odds are you're not going to get sick? And when healthy people drop their health insurance, all the rest of us have to pay a little more for it because not everybody is 25 years old and indestructible. The elderly are going to get whacked pretty severely. The biggest way that the elderly are going to get whacked under this bill, under this GOP tax scam, is that it's going to kick in the automatic pay-go/sequestration cuts. The automatic cuts are going to kick in starting right after the first of the year if this legislation is signed by the president. And that's going to mean a 4% cut every year for the next 10 years into Medicare. Now, the last time Medicare was cut by 4% as a result of sequestration was 2013. And immediately Medicare stopped paying for expensive chemotherapy. expect that to happen again. If you're over 65, you're on Medicare, and you get cancer, the Republicans literally, their new tax bill is what Alan Grayson laid out on the floor of the House of Representatives last year. The new Republican health bill, number one, don't get sick. Number two, if you do get sick, die quick. That's it, right? That's the Republican tax bill. And the people who also are getting hurt under this, low-income families. The low-income families who claim the earned income tax credit will lose out on $19 billion over the next decade. Why? Because increases in the rate of taxation are no longer tied to the rate of inflation. This is a really slick trick that the Republicans have put together. They're tying taxation, excuse me, they're tying the rate, your increase in income taxes no longer to the rate of inflation, but instead to a chained CPI. Now, a chained CPI means that the consumer price index, the CPI, is chained to behavior. So if the government determines that beef has gotten so expensive that people are moving to chicken, say beef went from $1 a pound to $2 a pound, and chicken's only 50 cents a pound, so everybody moves to chicken. And I realize those numbers are nonsense, but I haven't bought beef or chicken since I was 16 years old. I have no idea what they cost. But in any case, let's just use those for example. If beef got more expensive under a chain CPI, rather than saying, gee, beef just went from $1 a pound to $2 a pound, there's a 100% increase in the price of beef, and that's, say, 5% of the total cost of food, so we're going to have a 2.5% increase in our food costs. Instead of saying, oh, inflation just went up 2.5%, what they're going to say instead is, oh, people are going to stop eating beef and start eating chicken, and chicken is less expensive than beef, so the inflation rate actually went down. So since the inflation rate went down, your tax bracket is not going to go up. Although your wages may go up because actual inflation is going up. And as your wages go up along with inflation, you're not earning any extra buying power, but your tax rate will go up even faster. In other words, you will move into higher tax brackets very rapidly if you make less than $150,000 a year, especially if you make less than $90,000 a year. You're going to see over the next 10 years a loss of $19 billion total, just because of the way they calculated the CPI. Why'd they calculate the CPI that way? Because they want to give $19 billion to the Koch network and the other billionaires that have paid their way. Other people getting hurt, people in high property tax states, people in high income tax states, New Jersey, New York, California, Oregon, and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is going to get hit really, really badly. There's a 12.5% tax on intellectual property coming in from foreign countries. And this new tax bill, Puerto Rico said, hey, you know, give us an exemption. Consider us part of the United States. We're all American citizens after all, and we're a U.S. territory. Congress, the Republicans in Congress said, nah, not going to do that. Sorry, Charlie. You're going to have to pay tax. You know, companies in Puerto Rico are going to have to pay taxes as if they were operating overseas, which means that the few remaining businesses, American businesses in Puerto Rico, in all probability, are fixing to leave. You know, they're going to say, you know, enough of this nonsense. And finally, the Internal Revenue Service, the last of the losers. Remember Donald Trump saying, you know, we're going to get your income tax down to where it's on a postcard. We're going to do it the way they do it in Norway or the way they do it in Japan, where the government calculates your tax. And it's really simple. And, you know, the tax code in Japan is only a few hundred pages. Tax code in the United States is, what, 75,000 pages or something like that. It's massive. Why? Because in Japan, it's illegal to buy a politician and have them write legislation for you. In Germany, it's illegal to buy a politician and have them write legislation for you. In Finland and Norway and Denmark, it's illegal to buy a politician and have them write tax legislation for you. Here in the United States, our Supreme Court has decided that if you're rich and you buy a politician, you're simply exercising your First Amendment right to free speech. That's it. It's that simple. You're just exercising your First Amendment right to free speech in buying a politician and having them write a tax code that guarantees that you can give your money to your kids without their earning it and without them paying any taxes on it. You know, this is nuts. This is just plain old flat out nuts. And this is just the obvious stuff, right? I mean, we are just beginning to dig into this 1,000-page piece of legislation written almost entirely by lobbyists.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls and thoughts on this tax abomination after this. And welcome back. Omar in Herndon, Virginia, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Omar, what's on your mind today?
Tom, thank you so much. I wanted to call about California prisoners being used to battle the wildfire. And I think it's a little bit disturbing that in the United States we do that. And, I mean, they're getting paid $2 a day, not an hour. And they're getting a day off every day they work, taking off their prison sentence. You know, I think a day should have been equal to a month or a year. And even if they are on good behavior, they still cannot, if they get out, they cannot be a fireman or anything because they have a felony.
Right.
And I just don't think that's something we do. This is what they do in China or Burma or somewhere, you know. You know, if they're there to serve a sentence, that should be their time to serve this sentence.
Yeah, is it entirely voluntary,
training.
Omar?
I'm sorry?
Is it entirely voluntary?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely voluntary, but I just think the compensation is not equal. Some of these firemen maybe make $120 a year, and these prisoners are pretty much almost doing the same job as these firemen.
Well, they're not quite doing the same job. They're not, you know, I guess on occasion they may end up going into somebody's house or dealing with a neighborhood, but mostly they're out, you know, they're dealing with the forest. But I understand what you're saying, Omar, and I don't disagree with the sentiment that if we're going to have people doing work, it should be, you know, it should be fairly compensated on the one hand. On the other hand, you know, if I was in prison and I had an opportunity, even at no pay, to go out and fight a fire, I mean, you know, a nice break from the boredom and from the awful conditions in the prison. But I think that the solution to the boredom and the awful conditions in the prison is for us to adopt a penal system like Norway's, where we actually rehabilitate prisoners rather than simply punish them, which takes us back to your argument that this is not something that's appropriate for prison labor, and I agree with that. You know, we need prison reform from the bottom to the top. I mean, just a thorough change in prison stuff.
Absolutely. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you, if you can just help me understand with this tax bill, I'm hearing that it's going to hurt blue state more than the red state. Can you just explain that a little bit? Because I only understand things when you explain them.
Yeah, there's something called the SALT tax, or state and local tax, S-A-L-T, state and local tax. And so right now, if say you earned, you know, $50,000 a year and you paid $2,000 a year in state taxes, and you paid $3,000 a year in property tax on the house that you live in, that's a $5,000 deduction off your income. So normally those state and local taxes, the property tax and the state income tax, would be deducted from the $50,000 a year you earned, so your taxable income would only be $45,000 a year if you had $5,000 in state and local taxes. And so then you pay an income tax based on that $45,000 a year, and the $5,000 that you earned is tax-free. And what the Republicans are doing is they're saying that you can no longer deduct state and local taxes over $10,000 a year. Now, you know, people who have big, expensive houses may pay property taxes over $10,000 a year. That would typically be, you know, in a high property tax state, in a house that's worth probably more than, you know, $500,000 or even $1 million a year. But the state income taxes can be very substantial. So what happens is in high tax states like New Jersey, California, New York State, you lose the ability to take that exemption, and that's how it hurts people who live in those states. Outside of the billionaires, of course, who, you know, they've structured their estates, so that's not an issue. Omar, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I think this is probably comes under taxes and who is going to be affected, the most by this tax bill. I think that a lot of it is going to be the working class, and the working class. I'm reading a book called White Working Class, Overcoming Class Cluelessness by Joan C. Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also quotes a lot of Arlie Hochschild's work. He's an anthropologist that had actually gone down to places like Alabama, Mississippi, to, just talk to Tea Party people. And, this is the demographic that if we could somehow break through, and be able to develop a coalition between, African American working people and white working people, and at least question their views on this. I think that they don't get the information. They're really disgruntled with politics in general, and particularly
which they are you speaking of, John?
The party that used to represent them, which was the Democratic Party. So,
John, which they are you speaking of?
Say something?
Which they are you speaking of?
Which they?
Yeah, you started 3 sentences in a row with the word they, and I'm not sure which they you were talking about.
Well.
Was the they the Trump voters, or was the they the Democrats?
I think that, I'm talking about working class people that voted for Donald Trump.
Right. Okay.
I think that they meaning the working class, as I started out my comment about a book called White Working Class, Overcoming Class Cluelessness in America. Right. Apparently there's a disconnect between, the parties overall, politicians, the media, and what this party, what the working class actually is, or what class is. I mean, we don't have, a conversation about, class consciousness, what makes up the working class, what makes up the middle class. And the middle class is really going to be, hurt, but most of them are working class people, and she defines working class as between 30,000 and 89,000. She's a professor of law with the University of California, and the other person, Arlie Hochschild, is an anthropologist. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think that just, African Americans or any one particular group is going to win the day. We have to develop a strong solidarity and coalition, and we are divided in, I think the middle class and the working class are very divided, and that's the success that leads to having, being ruled by a Republican Party who have nobody's interest except their own. Right. It really.
Yeah, the point you identified, that they don't know what's going on, I think that is to say the white working class by and large. To a large extent, this is a failure of our media, and I think that it's a failure of our media that is not altogether unintentional, but also not altogether intentional. You've got the media corporations who don't want there to be a conversation on their airwaves about income inequality because they're wealthy and their executives are wealthy. You've got the media TV stars. Typically, if you see somebody more than one day a week on network television, odds are they're earning over $1 million a year. And in case, I think Joe Scarborough is $14 million a year. It's Rachel's
like
$7
somebody
million.
like Anderson Cooper, I think, comes to mind as being somewhat clueless to this whole thing. And, I mean, he comes from an extremely wealthy family and privileged background.
Yeah, he's Gloria Vanderbilt's
son. What would he really know
grandson.
about the working class, say, in the Midwest or in any other part of the country? He just, I don't think he really gets it because it's just not important to them.
But that's my point, John. Is that there's a structural cluelessness that's not actually cluelessness. It's you can't expect the overclass, the overlords, the big corporations own our media, the millionaires that they put on the air, the millionaires on right-wing hate radio who are spiffed by billionaire-funded foundations. You know, Rush Limbaugh getting millions of dollars a year, Sean Hannity getting millions of dollars a year from Heritage and all these other foundations. You can't expect them to talk about issues of poverty. You can't expect them to even talk about issues of inequality. And I you know, I absolutely agree with you. The average American is not getting that, and they're not getting that because it's been excised from our dialogue and from our media dialogue, and that's wrong.
And can I say just one last thing? I think anyone, you know, that's interested in this topic should read about it, because she goes into issues of, you know, a lot of the middle class really resent the poor. They're aiming all of their hostility instead of at the rich, at the poor, when in fact it's the rich that are really, you know, making their lives miserable. It isn't people receiving benefits on the bottom rung of the ladder. And, you know, that needs to be, you know, that point needs to be made. I don't feel cheated because, you know, there are people receiving welfare in my community or receiving benefits in my community. I think that, you know,
I get it,
people
John.
need those benefits.
I get it. They do, and what we have is by the way, the only people you will find talking about this are people like Jesse Drucker and Alan Rappaport in the New York Times. I was just reading from their article. My odds are, as beat reporters to the New York Times, they're making less than $100 grand a year. They are in the middle class, and so gee whiz, they're talking about the middle class. You're not seeing that so much on TV. John, thanks for the call. David in Pittsburgh, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind? David?
Yeah, I just come up with a really good idea. You know, the media, the quote unquote corporate media that comes out with all this fake news and all this stuff.
Right.
I think what we ought to do on the East Coast, because people on the East Coast can do it better than on the West Coast, is start picketing Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, and all these big corporations, and start picketing in front of their corporate media.
We'd like real news.
You know,
yeah,
like
I'm with you, David. David, thanks for the call. Over the weekend, I watched France 24 on BBC. It was amazing what I learned that wasn't in the American media.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Remember a couple decades ago when National Lampoon ran the cover story the cover that had the picture of the cute little dog and the guy with a big gun, and it said, you know, buy this magazine or we shoot the dog? I'm not going to make crazy threats like that today. This is our new dog, who has yet to be named. And she says, please help Free Speech TV, right? Right? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Please help Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV needs you. Here we are. This is, you know, we went through 3 weeks and we're still 35,000 or thereabouts short. And so we're going to try and raise it as quick as we can this week, and really could use your help right now. 877-378-8669. We really need to close this thing out. We need to pay the bills. We need to get this stuff nailed down. Pick the cliche of your choice. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen today. And if not today, then tomorrow or the next day. But let's try to make this as short as possible. I'd love to get back to reading book reports, and I'm sure that you would like to get back to watching them or hearing them. So please, if you haven't contributed to Free Speech TV yet, and I know the vast majority of our viewers have not, because it's just the nature of, you know, nonprofit radio and television, whether it's free speech or whether it's NPR or something else, except the Free Speech TV doesn't go begging to big corporations like NPR does. But in any case, if you'd like to make a contribution, if you can afford to make a contribution, and if you haven't already donated to Free Speech TV, or if you have, but you can afford a little bit more, please consider calling right now, 877-378-8669. We have to hit this budget for the year's end. It is the end of the year. It is tax deductible. You might want to talk to your tax people or your spouse or whatever, you know, whoever's, you know, organizing that kind of stuff with you, for you, about whether this is an appropriate thing to do, and if so, to what extent. But this is a great time of year to be making contributions. You know, as we kind of settle in and look at the past year and say, okay, well, you know, how much of this should I set aside to be tax deductible? How much should we give to charity? What kind of charities do we want to support? There's a lot of good ones out there. Free Speech TV is one of the best. Free Speech TV makes such efficient use of your contributions. With a $30 gift, you get a Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $60 gift, you get the Free Speech TV 16-month catalog in addition to the bumper sticker. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Ann Jones's new book, Beyond the Messy Truth. You know, a brilliant look at the economic situation in America. With a $240 gift, or $20 a month for a year, you get Claudia Rankin's book, Citizen. And with a $360 gift, or $30 a month for a year, you get all of that stuff: the bumper sticker, the calendar, the copy of Van Jones's book, Claudia Rankin's book, and my book, Unequal Protection. With a $1,000 contribution, come to Portland or Washington, D.C., although 9 times out of 10 we're going to be in Portland. And you know, let's get together. Let's have a nice meal. So that's it. It's quite straightforward. Free Speech TV needs your help. Free Speech TV exists, operates, continues to operate as a result of your help. This is a network that was built by its viewers. And if you're a viewer of Free Speech TV, if you find value in this program, if you find value in other programs, you know, your contribution is also essentially a way of voting, a way of registering your approval. And one of the things that Free Speech TV looks at as they look at their lineup of programs is, you know, because they're not a big commercial corporate network that subscribes to Nielsen ratings and things, which costs probably more than Free Speech TV pays on anybody's salary. You know, they're not doing that. Instead, the metric that they use to determine, you know, which shows are successful and which ones aren't is who's contributing. And it's a pretty good metric because it gives you instant feedback on, okay, these people are contributing to this show, so we better keep this show on the air. And these people aren't contributing to this show, and so, you know, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth the time, effort, and money to keep this show on the air if we're not making the contributions? Now, I think with our show, we're doing okay. I don't think that our show is at any risk with Free Speech TV. But, you know, look at the entire line. And of course, when you call and make your contribution, even during our show, you can say, this is for all of Free Speech TV. I love all your programming. Or you can say, hey, you know, that show, I like better than this one, or this one, you know. They actually take notes from your call. Now, just like when you're calling a member of Congress, don't call with a list of 6 things, because, you know, that's a lot to ask somebody to write down, or even 2 things. But if you've got one good solid suggestion or complaint or critique or praise, everybody loves loves praise. Free Speech TV would love to hear from you. Here's your chance, 877-378-8669. Call them now and make a contribution and become part of this family. Become part of the Free Speech TV network. Become part of the Free Speech TV family. We need your help. Free Speech TV needs your help. The programs on Free Speech TV need your help. Please, call now, 877-378-8669. Let's get this fund drive over as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you so
much. I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And the winners and losers in the tax bill becoming fairly obvious. There are a number of other things that I think are really worth talking about. First of all, the tax bill, it's all about cutting income to the federal government. And over a 10-year period, the top 1% are going to gain $5 trillion. The bottom 99% are going to lose $3.5 trillion. And the remaining $1.5 trillion will be added to the national debt. Also, we can give a $5 trillion tax cut. They keep characterizing it as a $1.5 trillion tax cut. No, that's just the amount added to the debt. When you add the amount that they're taking away from people who make less than $1 million a year and giving to people who make more than $1 million a year, it's a $5 trillion tax cut. Now, that's the tax cut. That doesn't deal with spending. The Constitution is very clear that only Congress can appropriate, only Congress can lay taxes, and only Congress can appropriate funds to be spent. The spending of them is done by the executive branch, but the appropriation of those funds, the gathering of the money, the authorization of the money, the handing the money over to the executive branch so that they can spend it, that all happens within Congress. And so Congress has to come up with a spending bill. And they don't have one. They've been operating under continuing resolutions for years. They're operating under continuing, basically all continuing resolution says is, you know, whatever we did last year, we're going to do the same thing this year. And the problem with that is it doesn't adjust things to inflation at all. It's not even as bad as the CPI that the Republicans are going to use to calculate your future taxes to move working class people, middle class people into higher tax brackets more rapidly. Keep in mind, the very rich are already at the highest tax bracket. They don't care about bracket creep. They don't care about inflation. You know, all they care about is their taxes going away. So there's that. And so House Republican leaders, now they have to come up with a way to spend the money that they are raising through taxes, or that in this case they're not raising through taxes. They want to raise the spending on the Defense Department to $650 trillion. Keep in mind, just a few years ago, it was only $500 trillion. You know, we spend more than the rest of the world pretty much combined on this stuff. It is nuts. It's just plain old flat out nuts what's going on and how just, you know, crazed it is. And this whole tax deal, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, he called it, I was grasping for a word just a minute ago. Chuck Schumer, the ultimate statement. He calls this, quote, a spectacle, a charade, a sop to some militant hard-right people who don't want the government to spend money on almost anything. And this is the spending bill, not the taxation bill. Right? They're gonna need this, and the Democrats are saying, we're not going to vote for your damn spending bill. See, it's going to take 60 votes to get it through the Senate. You can't do a spending bill. Well, you could do a spending bill via reconciliation, but you know, now that the Republicans have cut so much money so much income out of the federal budget by cutting taxes on billionaires and corporations. You know, now that they've done that, they're going to have, you know, a real serious problem passing a spending bill without 60 votes, because it's going to further add to the debt. And what that means, if they don't pass a spending bill and they don't pass a continuing resolution, right now we're operating under a continuing resolution that takes us to December 19th, which is tomorrow. And then, you know, they want to extend this. They're talking about extending it maybe to January 19th for another month. And they're talking about extending the Pentagon portion of it, the $650 billion they want to give away to the Pentagon, the home of fraud and waste, the home of $2 trillion that has never been accounted for. The group that flew pallets of $100 bills, $6 billion worth, enough to be seen from outer space over to Iraq, and then just handed them out. They want to give that spending increase to the Pentagon for a full year, while spending, you know, whatever increases for all the rest of it, not so much. And I've got a question for you. I find this absolutely fascinating. Susan Crawford, who wrote Responsive City and Captive Audience, a couple of books. She's a professor at the Harvard Law School. And over at Wired magazine, she's writing about the case of Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky, or West Louisville specifically. She writes, not only would West Louisville get a better chance at better access for its homes and businesses, but the city could install fiber-controlled traffic signals, create better and cheaper connectivity for public safety agencies, and ship data around inexpensively to improve its operations. In other words, West Louisville is looking at doing what Chattanooga did, which is installing a municipal broadband infrastructure, having the city install high-speed fiber cable so that every business, every family, every person, every government office, every library has faster than a greased pig, you know, or to pick your metaphor, right, super fast internet capability. She writes, in a nutshell, the city would build the infrastructure and lease the capacity to private internet service providers. Grace Simral, the chief of civic innovation for Louisville, says, quote, we were looking at this as our smart city foundation. And then a couple of special interest groups came along and started running ads and lobbying against it. Now, one of them, predictably, was the Cable Trade Association in Kentucky. They were saying, you know, come on, we're the Cable Trade Association. You need to force people to get their internet from us. You know, Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, you know, we need to make money here. We need to pay our stockholders their $1 billion in dividends. We need to pay our CEOs his multi-million-dollar salary. He's got another house in Switzerland he wants to buy. But in addition to the usual suspects, the Cable Trade Association and their buddies, there was another group that was saying, don't have public broadband in Louisville. And this group was called the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Now, who is the Taxpayers Protection Alliance? They, for example, they just tweeted out, quote, Google suspended its fiber efforts in many cities due to costs, now wants Louisville taxpayers to foot the $5.4 million bill, which is just a complete lie, right? The Louisville deal had nothing to do with Google. Or a lie by deception, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what you would call it. But why did Charles and David Koch, who make their money on fossil fuels and Georgia Pacific and everything else, why do they care that Louisville might be getting public broadband? Do they own a broadband company? Are they planning on buying Comcast or Verizon? Is that what's next? Or do they just like the idea of consolidating the public information space into a small number of very, very, very wealthy hands? I suspect the latter. Meteor Blades, who wrote this piece, the subhead for the photograph of the Koch brothers, says the Koch brothers ought to call their operations the Wrecking Crew. The public benefits would be substantial. right? You know, high-speed internet. It's good for business. This is the freeway of the modern era. This is important stuff. And the Koch brothers want it not to happen. What is it? Anything that's good for America, they're opposed to. You know, if it's good for America in general and not just exclusively for the billionaire class. Is that what it's come down to? What do you think? We'll pick up your calls after this. Stick around. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Patsy in Pismo Beach, California. Hey, Patsy, thanks for watching Free Speech on DirecTV. What's on your mind?
Yeah, that's Arroyo Grande. Sorry, not Pismo Beach. We're right next door.
Oh, okay. Close enough.
So, yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine last night. She asked me this question. If this legislation passes, which will be devastating to us because we're senior citizens, you know, just hanging in there on Social Security, how do we overturn it or get rid of it? Do we challenge the legitimacy in courts? Do we circulate petitions? Do we turn it over to the states to tax corporations and billionaires for public needs? What needs to be done?
There is only, to the best of my knowledge, Patsy, there's only one good, clean, simple solution. Lawsuits, actually everything in the list that you just went through, all fall into the category of slice and dice solutions. You know, they may deal with a small piece of it, or they might deal with it for your city, or they might deal with it for 6 months or a year. But none of them are dealing with the large systemic issue. And the large systemic issue is that the Republican Party was captured over a century ago by the billionaire class. Back then it was the millionaire class, but, you know, same people. It was captured by them and has been exclusively operating in their interest ever since. The Democratic Party back in the day was captured by the unions and working people and has been the advocate for working people and unions. Now, Bill Clinton tried to move the Democratic Party into also being the party of banksters and pharmaceutical companies and other big industries that theoretically were, quote, clean industries, that were non-controversial industries, telecommunications, you know, tech companies, things like that. But they have become over time less clean and more controversial. And the Democratic Party is going through this long and tortuous process of disentangling itself, or at least, you know, many members of the Democratic Party disentangling themselves from those connections. But the bottom line is, if we want to stop the tax scam, we need to get not just Democrats, but progressive Democrats elected. And that means getting involved with your local Democratic Party. It means getting progressive Democrats in the primary. It means building a farm team by getting progressive Democrats on your school board, on your city council, you know, signed up as dog catcher, whatever it may take. We've got to take back the Democratic Party and simultaneously help the Democratic Party take back this country. Does it make sense, Patsy?
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, we've been trying to do that. You know, we go to all these meetings with the progressives and whatever, but it just seems like it's awfully slow. Yet they can do so much damage with these tenure clauses and whatever. Yeah. We were just wondering if there was anything more immediate.
I don't think so. And yeah, it is slow on the one hand. On the other hand, you'll be amazed at how fast November of next year comes. And you're going to have state and local elections next November. And, you know, this is a political problem. And it's a political problem foisted upon us by the Supreme Court, who have always, throughout history, all the way back to John Marshall, you know, the second Supreme Court justice, John Jay, arguably, even the first Supreme Court justice. They've always been spokespeople for oligarchy and for the very, very wealthy. You know, Alexander Hamilton would argue it was set up that way. But they are the ones who brought us this, and, you know, they created this as a political situation by declaring that owning politicians was a First Amendment right, and only the very, very wealthy can actually afford to own a politician in this day and age. And so that's what we've got is oligarchy. Patsy, thank you for the call. And to overthrow oligarchy, we need to seize control of our political system. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Thom Hartmann here with you, and Carol in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. I have to challenge John on what I'm hearing because that part of what he's talking about is the Franklification of our language by talking about middle class and working class as if they are two separate pieces of the pie. They are not. I would argue that we are all working class unless we are independently wealthy. Everyone is working class. There may be classes within the working class. Some may make more than others, but we are really all working class people. And I would also say that when we started using the two different terms, it's when the Democrats started losing elections, both locally and nationally, because they were pitting people against each other, working versus middle. And I still say we are all working class, and it takes me back to a Lyndon Johnson quote, which goes something like this: if you can convince the lowest white he is better than the highest black, he won't notice you picking his pockets. In fact, he may empty them for you.
Right, and that was Lyndon Johnson talking about Richard Nixon's strategy. Yeah, you're absolutely right. However, there's an interesting dynamic. It's almost a problem here, Carol, and I frankly don't know what to do about it. If you, because I've been in all these different classes, right? And not all of them. I've never been a billionaire.
Right.
I've never been a multimillionaire. But I have had years where my income was really substantial, and I have had years where my income was literally zero. In fact, multiple years where my income was zero. And in some cases, we were living off our savings, and in some cases, we were just poor. I mean, we lived in a trailer for a couple of years when we were starting the Children's Village up in New Hampshire to keep our expenses down. We were living on $25 a year for 5 years. It wiped us out, frankly. But and my experience of that, and growing up also. I mean, I was the oldest of 4 boys. There were 6 of us growing up in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in Lansing, Michigan, a little $13,000 house that my dad bought back in 1956. So, I've kind of seen the whole thing, and I can tell you, somebody making $20,000 a year has a whole different set of priorities than somebody making $120,000 a year, who has a largely different set of priorities than somebody making $190,000 a year. And yet we would call all of those, at least under this tax plan, middle class. In fact, we would call middle class anything up to, where you kick into the 39% tax bracket, soon to be 37, which I think is over $400,000 a year. So it's a pretty massive amount of money. So, people who are making a couple $100,000 a year may consider themselves middle class. And in fact, they do. All the studies show that people who make less than $500,000 a year consider themselves middle class. But their concerns are very, very different than the concerns of people making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. And it used to be, when we were heavily unionized, that there were even union jobs that were making the equivalent in today's dollars of a couple $100,000 a year. There still are in some places. Police officers in New York City, for example, can earn $150,000 a year when you figure in overtime and everything else. But as the union movement has disintegrated, the cultural, structural kind of club structure that brought people of varying incomes but all not rich together has disintegrated as well. And you're right, Carol, that makes us vulnerable to fighting with each other, which is, you know, the Koch brothers would like nothing better. That's the whole basis of Paul Ryan's strategy, and, or excuse me, of Scott Walker's strategy in Wisconsin, of getting the workers in the for-profit sector to support destroying unions for the nonprofit sector, not knowing that they were going to become after next. So what do we do about that, Carol?
And that's the big question, is how do we convince people that the guy that is digging a ditch who belongs to the unions, who makes $30 an hour, is the reason I can sit in an office and make $35 an hour. It's not. It's the Paul Wellstone, right? A rising tide lifts all boats, and we need. I don't know how to get back to that, exactly what you were talking about, because that was my life too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the guy who owned my dad's tool and die shop, where Dad worked, Lansing Die Sinking, Lansing Tool and Die Sinking. The guy who owned that was a friend of our family's. His son-in-law was my business partner, and he was middle class too. I mean, you know, he had enough money to own a tool and die shop, which he and his three brothers started from scratch. But you know, and they lived in a nicer house than us. But you know, our house was a $13,000 house. Their house was probably a $60,000 house. You know, add one more zero to those numbers for today's values. But you know, they considered themselves middle class. It's like those days are over, right? All these small companies are being bought by giant corporations, and the leveraged buyouts and the Mitt Romneys of the world are doing their very best to make sure there's no small or medium-sized businesses left. And what do we do with the class structure that goes with that? Carol, you raise a really important question. Sorry I don't have an instant answer. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Remember a couple decades ago when National Lampoon ran the cover story the cover that had the picture of the cute little dog and the guy with a big gun, and it said, you know, buy this magazine or we shoot the dog? I'm not going to make crazy threats like that today. This is our new dog who has yet to be named. And she says, please help Free Speech TV, right? Right? Yeah, there you go. Okay. Please help Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV needs your... Here we are. This is, you know, we went through 3 weeks and we're still 35,000 or thereabouts short. And so we're going to try and raise it as quick as we can this week, and really could use your help right now. 877-378-8669. We really need to close this thing out. We need to pay the bills. We need to get this stuff nailed down. Pick the cliche of your choice. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen today. And if not today, then tomorrow or the next day. But let's try to make this as short as possible. I'd love to get back to reading book reports, and I'm sure that you would like to get back to watching them or hearing them. So please, if you haven't contributed to Free Speech TV yet, and I know the vast majority of our viewers have not, because it's just the nature of, you know, nonprofit radio and television, whether it's free speech or whether it's NPR or something else, except the Free Speech TV doesn't go begging to big corporations like NPR does. But in any case, if you'd like to make a contribution, if you can afford to make a contribution, and if you haven't already donated to Free Speech TV, or if you have, but you can afford a little bit more, please consider calling right now, 877-378-8669. We have to hit this budget for the year's end. It is the end of the year. It is tax deductible. You might want to talk to your tax people or your spouse or whatever, you know, whoever's, you know, organizing that kind of stuff with you, for you, about whether this is an appropriate thing to do, and if so, to what extent. But this is a great time of year to be making contributions. You know, as we kind of settle in and look at the past year and say, okay, well, you know, how much of this should I set aside to be tax deductible? How much should we give to charity? What kind of charities do we want to support? There's a lot of good ones out there. Free Speech TV is one of the best. Free Speech TV makes such efficient use of your contributions. With a $30 gift, you get a Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $60 gift, you get the Free Speech TV 16-month catalog in addition to the bumper sticker. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Ann Jones's new book, Beyond the Messy Truth. You know, a brilliant look at the economic situation in America. With a $240 gift, or $20 a month for a year, you get Claudia Rankin's book, Citizen. And with a $360 gift, or $30 a month for a year, you get all of that stuff, the bumper sticker, the calendar, the copy of Van Jones's book, Claudia Rankin's book, and my book, Unequal Protection. With a $1,000 contribution, come to Portland or Washington, D.C., although 9 times out of 10 we're going to be in Portland. And, you know, let's get together. Let's have a nice meal. So that's it. It's quite straightforward. Free Speech TV needs your help. Free Speech TV exists, operates, continues to operate as a result of your help. This is a network that was built by its viewers. And if you're a viewer of Free Speech TV, if you find value in this program, if you find value in other programs, you know, your contribution is also essentially a way of voting, a way of registering your approval. And one of the things that Free Speech TV looks at is they look at their lineup of programs is, you know, because they're not a big commercial corporate network that subscribes to Nielsen ratings and things, which costs probably more than Free Speech TV pays on anybody's salary. You know, they're not doing that. Instead, the metric that they use to determine, you know, which shows are successful and which ones aren't is who's contributing. And it's a pretty good metric because it gives you instant feedback on, okay, these people are contributing to this show, so we better keep this show on the air. And these people aren't contributing to this show. And so, you know, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth the time, effort, and money to keep this show on the air if we're not making the contributions? Now, I think with our show, we're doing okay. I don't think that our show is at any risk with Free Speech TV. But, you know, look at the entire line. And of course, when you call and make your contribution, even during our show, you can say, this is for all of Free Speech TV. I love all your programming. Or you can say, hey, you know, that show, I like better than this one. Or this one, they actually take notes from your call. Now, just like when you're calling a member of Congress, don't call with a list of 6 things, because, you know, that's a lot to ask somebody to write down, or even 2 things. But if you've got one good solid suggestion or complaint or critique or praise, everybody loves praise. Free Speech TV would love to hear from you. Here's your chance, 877-378-8669. Call them now and make a contribution and become part of this family. Become part of the Free Speech TV network. Become part of the Free Speech TV family. We need your help. Free Speech TV needs your help. The programs on Free Speech TV need your help. Please, call now, 877-378-8669. Let's get this fund drive over as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 34 minutes past the hour. And Dorothy in Upland, California. Hey, Dorothy, what's on your mind today?
Can you hear me?
Just fine. Am I faint in your ear?
Yes, you are.
Okay, yeah, we fixed that on Friday, and then we unfixed it this morning when I forgot to plug my mic in, and so we've got to fix it again. My apologies, but what's up?
Okay. My question is about the medical deduction. The IDSA collided with the insurance cartel to create guidelines to deny coverage for chronic Lyme's patients. And when one finds a treatment plan, it's all 100% out of pocket.
Really?
Or in other words, a 100% coinsurance. And the only relief is the medical tax credits, and I'm just wondering if that has been nixed.
To the best of my knowledge, and again, this is still a moving target. This thing is theoretically out of the House Senate Conference Committee, but it has not yet been scored and by the CBO, which will probably happen tomorrow or Wednesday. And when it is scored, they'll vote on it, within hours. But they could also change it if the score isn't what they want. But my understanding is that the medical exemption, which says that if your medical expenses are over 10% of your gross adjusted annual income, you may deduct those expenses from your income for the purposes of taxation, that actually is still intact, that you will still be able to deduct medical expenses. My understanding is that they gave up on really screwing the middle class that way.
Well, I guess that'd be the only one good thing out of it.
Yeah, well, it's, gee, have we really reached the point where we sit around and say it's a good thing that they didn't take away from us something that we always had? I mean,
exactly.
It's like, that's how low our expectations are. It's a really sad state. But spot on, Dorothy. Dorothy, thanks for the call. It's good talking with you. Thank you. Stephen in Renton, Washington. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?
Just fine, Stephen. Yeah.
Excellent, because I have to leave you on speakerphone. I'm listening to you this morning on my little LG flip phone because KBCS here that I normally listen to is preempting the program to play King 5's coverage of disaster porn of the train crash. Actually closer to you than to me.
Well,
anyway,
Stephen, let me just say two things. Number one, the first 10 minutes of our show, we had no audio. I had forgotten to plug my microphone in. It was entirely my fault. But a lot of our stations, as a result of that, were like, oh, my God, there's no audio. What do we do? And so they just threw something on the air. It may be that KBCS did that, and they don't know that we're back on the air. Or two, one of the big hits on Cumulus and Clear Channel buying 2,000 radio stations all over the country and then, voice tracking them from remote locations was, the case that you had 5-6 years ago where a train containing poisonous chlorine gas derailed in a little town in Idaho, as I recall, maybe Utah. And there were 2 radio stations in that town, but nobody knew about the train derailment because they were both owned from out of state and programmed from out of state, and there was no local programming. So if you've got a station in Washington State that is carrying programming about the train crash, I'm not sure I have a problem with that. Anyhow, back to you, Stephen.
I don't have a problem with it either, Tom. I'm fortunate that I'm able to listen to all of your show actually in the phone. So God bless the coverage we do have. I didn't really initially have a point because it's the main thing to answer the overall question about why are is I'm constantly reminded of the billionaires and ballot bandits and the best democracy money can buy. That they want it all. They want it all. And evidently, they've been working on this now for a long time, and there's just they're heading toward ending up with their goals because they're really good at that. Because as we know, they're really, really cunning and intelligent. But anyway, I want to thank you, Tom. For all of the wonderful things you guys do. And thank you for being there. And now you're even closer to us.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, it's nice being here on the left coast. I appreciate it. Great to hear from you. Thank you for the call. Larry in Soyasset, New York. Am I saying that right, Larry?
Close. Syosset.
Sciatic. Okay. Town I'm not familiar with. So what's on your mind?
Okay. I want to talk about the Constitution of the United States. There's something that's always been bothering me. And I want to know what your thoughts are on it, about the way the Republicans are always screaming, we got to protect the rights, especially the Second Amendment rights. We got to protect our rights. But when it comes to other parts of the rights, they're not interested in protecting. And I'm thinking specifically of the 7th Amendment to the Constitution.
So you're talking about forced arbitration?
About what?
You're talking about forced arbitration?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the 7th, for people who don't know what we're talking about, Larry, let me just jump in here real quick, and then I'll throw it back to you. The Seventh Amendment of the Constitution says that for any matter, I think it was $20. Yeah, in suits of common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. In other words, you can appeal to the Supreme Court, but that's it. And, and through the appeals process. And so what they're saying with the Seventh Amendment says is you have an absolute right to sue a company. Keep in mind, this is at issues over $20, as long as it's over 20 bucks, which back in the day was the equivalent of maybe $2,000 in today's money. You have the absolute right to sue if a company has screwed you. And what these companies are constantly doing, whether it's click here when you buy the app or you use something on software, and as you click there, you don't realize that there's a paragraph in there that says that you are giving up your Seventh Amendment right to sue. I remember back in the 1980s, I bought a house, and I went through this period where I was like fanatic about reading contracts, and I read the contract, and literally in the contract it said, in all cap letters, which they do because they don't want you to read. It's harder to read all caps than upper and lower case because the words no longer have shape. But in any case, in all cap letters, it says, I hereby surrender my rights under the Seventh Amendment of the Constitution and agree to arbitration proceedings rather than a trial by a jury, or words to that effect. And I'm reading this going, what? This mortgage is requiring me to surrender my Seventh Amendment rights under the Constitution? And yes, this is a common part of employment contracts now. This is a common part of purchase agreements. It's getting harder and harder and harder to hold corporate criminals to account. Okay, Larry, that's the setup. Back to you.
Okay, so my question, I always called that amendment, by the way, probably America's first government regulation, because it protects the consumer.
Yes.
It frustrates me how we can maybe get the word out to Americans that this is what's going on.
Right.
What do you think?
I think most people don't even know what arbitration is. And apropos of that, let me very quickly explain it. If you sign an agreement that has forced arbitration in it, and usually it doesn't use the word forced, but it excludes lawsuits. What that means is that if Larry, if you were a vendor to me, let's say you were my lawyer or something, or let's take something even more pedestrian. I bought a car from you, and you knew when I bought this used car from you that it was a complete lemon and that the brakes were failing, but you told me everything was wonderful. And I drove the car, 3 blocks, hit the brake pedal, the brakes didn't work, and I smashed into a tree. And I'm suing you over that. If the agreement that you and I signed when you sold me that car says that I have to go to arbitration rather than to a lawsuit, I no longer have the right to sue you, which is a right guaranteed by the Seventh Amendment, and instead I have to go before a corporate court in which the judges are also very often the prosecutors, the lawyers, the corporate side lawyers. And that person is an arbiter, it's called. He or she is basically a judge. What they say is final. It cannot be appealed. It cannot be appealed to a higher court, an appeals court. It can't be appealed before a jury. It can't be appealed to the Supreme Court. It is final. And your odds of getting what you want out of that arbitration are pretty close to 0 or 10%, right. Number one. And number two, if it's a small amount of money, let's say that you want to sue Wells Fargo because they opened an account and you didn't ask them to, and they charge you $20 a month for the account or $10 a month for the account for 2 years. They owe you $200, right? But you can't afford to hire a $500 an hour lawyer, which is what it takes to sue Wells Fargo, for a $200 suit. So you want to get together with 5,000 friends who also got screwed by Wells Fargo. Well, sorry, if you all signed an agreement that says you have to do forced arbitration, that means each one of you individually has to do it through an arbitration process. You no longer can even do a class action lawsuit. This is all very, very wrong stuff. It's stuff the Republicans love. It's stuff corporations love. It's stuff that screws the average working person, the average consumer.
So can we get in touch with who are Congress, senators and things, and have them pass a law, make this illegal?
Yes, there are numerous efforts to do this right now. Robert Reich has done a couple of videos on this. The senator who was most outspoken about this was Al Franken. Al Franken was constantly talking about how corporations use forced arbitration to avoid lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, it's one of the more unfortunate things about Al Franken leaving the Senate. But there are some real heroes out there for this, and we do need to do something about it, because it's just another way to take power away from average working people, average consumers, and give it to the big corporations. Larry, thanks for the call. It's a very important one to point out. We'll be right back. Stick around. We got another 4 or 5 minutes here, a break, and then Bob Ney with Talk Media News will be with us. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with Bob Ney with Talk Media News and the news of the day, and more of your calls and my thoughts on all of the above after this. Welcome back. Melinda in Abaculu, or how do you say that town in New Mexico, Melinda? Melinda?
Yes.
Hey, you're on the air. How do I pronounce your town?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, you're on the air. How do I pronounce your town?
It's I'm in New Mexico in Abacu.
Abacu. Okay, so what's up, Melinda?
Yes. Well, you know, first of all, I want to say that I love your new dog.
Oh, thank you. We do too.
And I'm so glad you got an opposite gender from the one that you have. I had an animal sanctuary, and I learned that it's the ones of the same gender that have a tendency to fight. So, yeah. So anyway, she's darling.
Thank you.
So anyway, I'm so appreciative to what you do, and you're kind of like a clearinghouse of information between you and all your listeners. It's amazing. And I went and watched the Trumping Democracy right away, the same night that you did. Everybody has to watch that.
Isn't that mind-boggling?
It is.
And there's not a Russian in sight. I mean, it's all about how the Mercers and Cambridge Analytica basically stole the election. Well, not stole the election. How sophisticated electioneering has gotten. That's the mind-blowing part of it.
Manipulation.
Yes.
Yes. And so, and I live out here. Well, let me see. Make it long. I was raised in the Seventh-day Adventist church. I was all the schools. I mean, until I was pretty old, I never even talked to anyone that wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist.
Uh-huh.
And I had a parting of ways with it. You know, through all that, I really learned Jesus' teachings, and I had a parting of ways with them, because you know how young people are about hypocrisy when they are taught one thing and they see nobody's living it. And I left a long time ago because Christians were so un-Christ-like, you know. And I don't belong to any organized religion, but I've held, that was put into me, compassion, taking care of people who are worse off than you. That was just ingrained in me.
Yeah, and the Seventh-day Adventists are particularly good at that, by the way. You might consider them eccentric. They keep the Sabbath on Saturday, which is actually how it's written in the Bible. But they also believe that in the very beginning in Genesis, where he said the plants shall be your food, that literally that's what nature intended. And so they eat a plant-based diet. And as a consequence of that, they're some of the healthiest people in America. They run hospitals. Loma Linda University, a good friend of mine, had his prostate cancer treated there. Spectacular success. It's just, when we ran the Community for Abused Kids, the Seventh-day Adventists, because we were vegetarians, they loved us, and they used to bring us books and blankets and all kinds of stuff. So we got to know them. It seemed like good people. I mean, any religion can become a cult, but they seemed like good people.
Yes, and I'm thankful to them. I was a health nut practically from the day I was born, and I've been really grateful for that. All the teachings about health, the body is a temple. They had the greatest stop smoking programs decades ago, before people even knew that smoking was bad for you. But the reason I'm calling is I lost my home 10 years ago. I've been homeless ever since. And I don't want to go into that story.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But you have no idea what it's like to be homeless until you are one. How invisible you become, how you can't get traction, and nobody. Some people want to help you, but other people just want you to disappear. They attack you. All kinds of things go on with that. And, and I wasn't raised expecting to end up in that position, but still, I look for ways to make a difference.
Melinda, this conversation deserves more depth than this. Can you call back a little later on in the week and we can talk about it a little more?
Okay, well,
Please.
That's not what I was calling about, but we've run out of time.
Okay, yeah, because we're out of time. Thank you, Melinda. Welcome back. Let's check in with Bob Ney with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by GoatsForTheOldGoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. Bob is the author of Sideswiped, the book that will explain to you how Washington, D.C. works and tell Bob's amazing story. And Congressman, welcome back to the program. Bob? Bob?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go. I had my button on, so I wouldn't be broadcasting to I was supposed to. Sorry.
That's quite all right. So what's going on in the world today?
Well, a lot. We'll start domestically, of course, with President Trump. But it pertains to the world a bit. You know, each president announces a national security strategy. President Obama, and this is the first major change with President Trump from President Obama's national security strategy. The president basically declassifies climate change as a security problem. And we know that President Obama had that in there. So that's one of the big...
How can, Bob, I'm baffled. How can Trump declassify climate change as a national security issue when the Pentagon for years now has listed it among the top half a dozen or dozen national security issues that they're concerned about? I mean, they're hardening naval bases all around the world in anticipation of sea level rise. They're gaming war games, particularly in countries that are within 1,000 miles of the equator, or 500 miles of the equator. They're gaming war games, across Central Africa, across Central America, as a consequence of climate change. The Pentagon. I mean, the Pentagon was the ones who pointed out to us that the Syrian so-called rebellion, the April Spring or the Arab Spring, excuse me, in Syria, was really the result of over 1 million Syrian farmers losing their land to climate change as the desert moved south by 100 miles or so, and 1 million farmers ended up in Damascus, as street people. The Pentagon knows this. How can the president deny it?
Well, you make an amazing point and a great point, Tom, that a lot of people don't realize or talk about. It's not just about the heating of the oceans or the melting of the glaciers. That's important, but it's not just about that. It's about those issues that you just spoke about. And there can be disruption in countries. There can be total chaos. There can be revolutions, all types of national security problems based on the fact that, what you mentioned in Syria, if you look at overpopulated countries, there's just a lot of issues there. So they will look at that way. The military, by the way, will still probably look at it that way, and for their operational policy.
They have no choice. They have to. Because it's real.
Correct.
The Arab Spring, we all thought that this was, Thomas Jefferson being contagious, right? Turns out, whether it was Libya, whether it was Egypt, whether it was Tunisia, where the whole thing started, that was because that street vendor set himself on fire because the price of wheat had gone up so dramatically, and it had echoed through the price of all the foods in Tunisia, and that was the result of the damn drought, which was climate change. The whole Arab Spring thing was climate change, and the Pentagon knows this. This is not a secret.
Right, and even though this does not have the force of law in the sense that this is not a piece of legislation, it has the force of power. And I do want to remind people of that because it's a statement by the president. It's a statement of the direction that he wants to go in as the chief executive, of the United States.
And meanwhile, over at the EPA, they literally hired a contractor to go through the social media posts, including private posts and emails, private emails and text messages to the extent that the government can lay their hands on them, of EPA employees looking for an EPA employee who might have tweeted something nice about Hillary Clinton or sent an instant message to a friend saying that they think that Trump is an idiot, or just, hey, we need to do something about climate change. They're trying to purge the EPA of everybody except the good Nazis. This is amazing.
Well, I think, too, what's really unbelievable, look, people can disagree about what is causing climate change, or they can argue about the science of climate change internally. You know what I'm saying? There can be arguments. Well, this is causing more of a climate change than that. But to deny climate change, that it's occurring, is a whole different
Even
world.
ExxonMobil doesn't do that anymore.
Right, that's correct. They don't. Which anybody
incredible.
They did.
Just incredible. Anyhow, what else is going on in the world, Bob?
Well, and there's some other points to the policy, but actually it's about China and Russia and saying that they're, to be watched, on and on and on.
Right.
And of course, one conversation then different than action when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
We all know that. I think the Mueller case is interesting about the emails only because of the fact that the transition teams are transitioning from the political side into the government side. When they transition, they're dealing with the White House. The White House is a government building. I mean, I don't know if the transition team forgot that, because the transition team's pushing back very hard that Mueller had no right to get the emails. How did he get the emails? He shouldn't have had them. They had to go through the transition lawyers. Once a transition team, and they all knew this from the beginning, the 12 or 13 people involved with this, Tom, once the transition team begins, it is interlocking with the United States government. And the people that host a lot of the transition from the government's end of it is the General Services Administration of the United States government.
Right, the GSA.
So they interact. They use their servers. So therefore, the emails really became a government
well, and these emails are all in the domain of what is it, PTT.gov, Presidential Transition Team, or FTT, Federal Transition Team, whatever it is. It's something TT.gov. Anything that ends in .gov is owned by the government. You have no expectation of privacy if you are writing on your government email address. Arguably, you have no expectation of privacy if you're doing it on a corporate email address, too.
Correct.
I mean, it's unless your employer explicitly tells you, you have privacy. I mean, we've got the Thom Hartmann domain here. I don't even have a way, to the best of my knowledge, to read my employee's email, and wouldn't anyway. But I mean, if you're not, and for that matter, if you're using Gmail, Google's reading your email to figure out what to advertise to you. It's like,
correct.
These guys are nuts.
There is no privacy, but in this case, it's even worse for them because they used the GSA facilities, which therefore took them into the domains of the Gmail system for the government system.
Crazy stuff.
GSA. So
Bob Ney with Talk Media News. Bob, thanks so much for the report. Yep, good talking with you. Thank you, Bob. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeats.com. Remember a couple decades ago when National Lampoon ran the cover story or the cover that had the picture of the cute little dog and the guy with a big gun, and it said, you know, buy this magazine or we shoot the dog? I'm not going to make crazy threats like that today. This is our new dog, who has yet to be named. And she says, please help Free Speech TV. Right? Right? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Please help Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV needs your... Here we are. This is, you know, we went through 3 weeks and we're still 35,000 or thereabouts short. And so we're going to try and raise it as quick as we can this week, and really could use your help right now. 877-378-8669. We really need to close this thing out. We need to pay the bills. We need to get this stuff nailed down. Pick the cliche of your choice. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen today. And if not today, then tomorrow or the next day. But let's try to make this as short as possible. I'd love to get back to reading book reports, and I'm sure that you would like to get back to watching them or hearing them. So please, if you haven't contributed to Free Speech TV yet, and I know the vast majority of our viewers have not, because it's just the nature of, you know, nonprofit radio and television, whether it's free speech or whether it's NPR or something else, except the Free Speech TV doesn't go begging to big corporations like NPR does. But in any case, if you'd like to make a contribution, if you can afford to make a contribution, and if you haven't already donated to Free Speech TV, or if you have, but you can afford a little bit more, please consider calling right now, 877-378-8669. We have to hit this budget for the year's end. It is the end of the year. It is tax deductible. You might want to talk to your tax people or your spouse or whatever, you know, whoever's, you know, organizing that kind of stuff with you, for you, about whether this is an appropriate thing to do, and if so, to what extent. But this is a great time of year to be making contributions. You know, as we kind of settle in and look at the past year and say, okay, well, you know, how much of this should I set aside to be tax deductible? How much should we give to charity? What kind of charities do we want to support? There's a lot of good ones out there. Free Speech TV is one of the best. Free Speech TV makes such efficient use of your contributions. With a $30 gift, you get a Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $60 gift, you get the Free Speech TV 16-month catalog in addition to the bumper sticker. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Ann Jones's new book, Beyond the Messy Truth. You know, a brilliant look at the economic situation in America. With a $240 gift, or $20 a month for a year, you get Claudia Rankine's book, Citizen. And with a $360 gift, or $30 a month for a year, you get all of that stuff: the bumper sticker, the calendar, the copy of Van Jones's book, Claudia Rankine's book, and my book, Unequal Protection. With a $1,000 contribution, come to Portland or Washington, D.C., although 9 times out of 10 we're going to be in Portland. And you know, let's get together. Let's have a nice meal. So that's it. It's quite straightforward. Free Speech TV needs your help. Free Speech TV exists, operates, continues to operate as a result of your help. This is a network that was built by its viewers. And if you're a viewer of Free Speech TV, if you find value in this program, if you find value in other programs, you know, your contribution is also essentially a way of voting, a way of registering your approval. And one of the things that Free Speech TV looks at is they look at their lineup of programs is, you know, because they're not a big commercial corporate network that subscribes to Nielsen ratings and things, which costs probably more than Free Speech TV pays on anybody's salary. You know, they're not doing that. Instead, the metric that they use to determine, you know, which shows are successful and which ones aren't is who's contributing. And it's a pretty good metric because it gives you instant feedback on, okay, these people are contributing to this show, so we better keep this show on the air. And these people aren't contributing to this show, and so, you know, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth the time, effort, and money to keep this show on the air if we're not making the contributions? Now, I think with our show, we're doing okay. I don't think that our show is at any risk with Free Speech TV. But, you know, look at the entire the entire line. And of course, when you call and make your contribution, even during our show, you can say, this is for all of Free Speech TV. I love all your programming. Or you can say, hey, that show, I like better than this one, or this one, they actually take notes from your call. Now, just like when you're calling a member of Congress, don't call with a list of 6 things, because, that's a lot to ask somebody to write down, or even 2 things. But if you've got one good solid suggestion or complaint or critique or praise, everybody loves praise. Free Speech TV would love to hear from you. Here's your chance, 877-378-8669. Call them now and make a contribution and become part of this family. Become part of the Free Speech TV network. Become part of the Free Speech TV family. We need your help. Free Speech TV needs your help. The programs on Free Speech TV need your help. Please, call now, 877-378-8669. Let's get this fund drive over as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you so
much. I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Rebooting the American.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There's a story that I would like to share with you. And then out of that, as a consequence of that, I want to share with you a bit of a speech that President Obama gave last week. And the essential story is one that I've shared with you before. And that is the story of Milton Mayer. And basically and they thought they were free is the essential, that's the title of the book. And I want to just read to you just a little background story here. In 1955, this book was published by University of Chicago Press. It was called They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer. Milton Mayer was a newspaper man out of Chicago. He traveled in the very late 1940s, early 1950s. I'm not sure the exact year. He traveled to Germany. He spent a year in Germany. During that year, he became very, very close to 10 Germans who, none of whom were members of the military, none of whom have fought in the war, all of whom lived through Germany in the workplace throughout the 30s and early 40s. And his question to them was, how could you, as a citizen, as a voter, as an employee, how could you have let this thing happen? This Nazi thing. How did you let it happen? And I want to just read a couple of paragraphs from what these ex-Nazis, I mean, I refer to them as Nazis. You had to pretty much join the Nazi party if you wanted to be able to get a job, just like, you had to be in the Ba'ath Party in Iraq if you wanted to have a job. It wasn't quite that rigorous, but, several of them had joined the party. That's not what it was all about. But I just want to read to you the comments of a couple of these Nazis about how Nazism took over Germany, and then I want to play a clip from President Obama from last week. So listen to this first. One said, what happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to being governed by surprise. Now, I got to tell you, day before yesterday, I was laying in bed. It was bedtime, right? It was like, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. I was getting ready to go to sleep. And I had my phone and I was reading, I read novels mostly to read myself to sleep. I read nonfiction and write nonfiction for a living. And so I'd been reading this novel by Robert Parker, and I decided, you know, I thought, well, I need to check the New York Times before I go to sleep, just in case Trump's tweeted something stupid, right? I mean, that's where we're all at, right? We're compulsively checking the news because we're being governed by surprise. Okay, anyhow, back to what the Nazis said. What happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people couldn't understand, or so dangerous that even if the people could understand it, it couldn't be released because of national security. This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap took place so gradually, so insensibly, each step disguised, perhaps not even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure, or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purpose. And all the crises and the reforms, and real reforms too, so occupied the people they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. To live in this process is absolutely not to be able to notice it. Please try to believe me, unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity than most of us ever had the occasion to develop. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion regretted, that unless one were detached from the whole process from the beginning, unless one understood that what the whole thing was in principle, what all these little measures that no patriotic German could resent must someday lead to, no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in the field sees the corn growing. And one day it's over his head. And he says, this is basically how it all goes. He says, you wait for the one great shocking occasion. This was a university professor. He says, German, you know, who lived through the Nazis. He said, you wait for the one great shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join you in resisting somehow. Let me step out of his speech right now and just say, I would say right now, the one great shocking occasion that a lot of Americans are expecting and waiting for is Trump firing Mueller. And they think, oh, then millions of people are going to come in the streets, right? Bruce Bartlett blogging about this, others blogging about this. Don't count on it. Okay, back to what the Nazis said about Germany in the 1930s. You wait for the one great shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join you in resisting somehow. You don't want to act or even talk alone. You don't want to go out of your way to make trouble. Why not? Well, you're not in the habit of doing it. And it's not just fear of standing alone that restrains you. It's also genuine uncertainty. Uncertainty is a very important factor. And instead of decreasing as time goes on, it grows. Outside in the streets, everyone's happy. One hears no protest, certainly sees none. You know, in France or Italy, there's slogans against the government painted on walls and fences. But in Germany, outside the great cities, perhaps, there's not even this. In the university community, in your own community, you speak privately to your colleagues, some who certainly feel as you do. But what do they say? They say, it's not so bad. You're seeing things. You're an alarmist. And you are an alarmist. That's the difficulty. If the last and worst act of the whole regime had come immediately after the first and smallest, thousands, yes, millions would have been sufficiently shocked if, let us say, the gassing of the Jews in '43 came immediately after the German firm stickers on the windows of non-Jewish shops in '33. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between come all the hundreds of little steps. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them, all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy, and some minor incident, in my case, my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, Jew swine, collapses it all at once. And you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. The world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were in at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring. The houses, the shops, the jobs, the mealtimes, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying with the forms, the spirit is changed. And now you live in a world of fear and hate. And people who hate and fear don't even know it themselves. Here is President Obama speaking to this issue last week.
We get complacent and assume that things continue the way they have been, just automatically, and they don't. You have to tend to this garden of democracy, otherwise things can fall apart fairly quickly. And we've seen societies where that happens, right? Now, presumably there was a ballroom here in Vienna in the late 1920s or 30s that looked pretty sophisticated and seemed as if, with the music and the art and the literature and the science that was emerging, it would continue into perpetuity. And then 60 million people died. And an entire world was plunged into chaos. So, you gotta pay attention and vote.
Yeah, but the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, is changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear, and the people who hate and fear don't even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. Now you live in a system which rules without responsibility, even to God, said Milton Mayer's ex-Nazi friend. So, I'm not hearing it, but I think we're hitting a break right now. We'll be back with more from the Thom Hartmann Program right after this. It's 15 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Dave, watching Free Speech TV in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, I like your summation of the evolution of the Republican Party. I think you had it right on, and it's really gotten there. I wonder if you saw a segment on 60 Minutes on McKesson. Did you happen to catch that?
No, I haven't watched 60 Minutes in a couple of years. I haven't seen it, Dave. What did I miss?
Well, do you know who McKesson is? The big
McKesson?
Yeah, they're the guys with the opioids.
Oh, the pharmaceutical company. Yeah. Oh, I read it. Yeah, I read a story about this, about how they were selling narcotic painkillers to fly-by-night internet pharmacies that were then redistributing them. Yeah.
In fact, these are pill mills.
Yeah.
And so you can add, to your list of people that are untouchables in the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
They're killing people.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it for years, and they're knowingly doing it for years.
Right, and the federal government chose to simply hit them with some fines rather than prosecute them for killing Americans.
And the fines amount to about 2 years compensation for their CEO. And that's it.
Yeah.
Now, that's pocket change for these people.
Oh, it's not even pocket change. It's a cost of doing business. It's probably tax deductible.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. But, there's just more evidence of what kind of world we're living in.
Yeah.
And there's a book called, and I don't know if I can say it on the air, The Chicken Bleep Club. Have you ever
Yes.
heard of that one?
Yes. In fact, we've one of our book reviews is and the bleep, of course, is a word for excrement. But right. Yeah, the Chicken Bleep Club, I've done a book review of that. It'll play from time to time here on Free Speech TV once the fun to drive is over.
Well, I'm in the middle of it, and this is exactly what our DOJ has become, a member of that club.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and by the way, it's been that way for a long time. I mean, look at how many bankers went to jail after the bankers crashed the economy in 2009.
That's right.
I think the number was exactly 0.
That was Eric Holder.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah. Eric Holder used to make his living and does now again in a silk-stocking white-collar law firm that defends corporate criminals. I mean, surprise, surprise, no corporate criminals went to jail, or to the best of my knowledge anyway. Certainly no banksters went to jail while Holder was AG. I mean, that shouldn't surprise anybody.
It looks like Big Pharma's not going to jail either.
Yeah, no, Big Pharma owns the political process in the United States, and so much more of the shame, but absolutely. And not only that, we subsidize them massively. All the new drug categories, all of them, every single new drug category that has been created in my lifetime was created with federal money. And then we hand these patents off to these for-profit companies, and they tweak them, every 10, 12 years, 15, 17 years, whatever it is for patents these days, so that they can extend the life of the patent. Spot on, Dave. Dave, thanks a lot for the call. It's very well said. I got to run here, but thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity,
resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us
raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Hearing myself in my ear. There we go. Now I'm hearing some music. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. Marcia in Angier, North Carolina. You can pot it down now. Marcia in, it's still full volume loud. There we go. Thank you. Marcia in Angier, North Carolina. Hey, Marcia, what's up?
I like that. Say my name 3 times.
There you go. What's up?
I haven't heard you. I haven't been able to call you since you got off the 800 number. I'm so happy to call you. Real quick, a shout out to Paul from Woodinville, Washington. You need to make your own podcast, brother.
Indeed.
The question was, what do we do? And what we need to be doing is forming cooperatives, forming eco-villages, okay? Because this system is not going to hold all of us.
Yep.
It is not designed to. It's not sustainable. And like that woman was talking about, she's homeless. There's going to be a lot of us. But the problem is, we got that middle class, working class problem. Never mind the ones that are being pushed out by a right-wing ethic. The ones that are leftists, we have issues with. Because when I go to a protest and I talk to people, hey, we need to get together. We need to form cooperatives. Plants take time to grow. You can't just, run over there and have an eco-village ready to feed whatever amount of people living on it. It has to be something that people start working on. They all look at you like, well, I got a job. I got health care. They don't have that interest. And that's going to be a problem, because when more of us are homeless and we're in the streets, we're going to pull at whatever tiny structure that is working, and that's going to make that not work.
Yeah.
We could make the healthcare system a cooperative. We don't have to have the government collect the money. We could collect the money ourselves and pay for each other's health care. We could do a lot of things. We just have to get in a room and talk about getting it started. People who have land, we need to be moving onto those people's land and putting tiny houses in the back, getting off the grid, because every time we pay our bills, we're just feeding the people who are crushing us.
Yeah.
We got to stop giving them money.
I agree with you, Marcia. And what we have right now, as a result of technology, is an extraordinary moment. Back in '78, when Louise and I started a community for abused kids, it was still kind of a commune. We all lived on the land, and we produced a lot of our own food, et cetera, et cetera. But back then, there was no technology, or at least it wasn't as well developed as it is now, to produce your own electricity. There was the technology of organic gardening was basically raised beds, Rodale. It was real simple stuff. Now between hydroponics, which can be used in cities, you can make entire walls on the outside of buildings into gardens. You can turn ceilings into buildings, roofs into buildings. the technology for producing food and for producing energy, which along with clothing and shelter are, the core essentials for human life. Yes. That technology is so advanced now that the idea of creating cooperatives that don't depend on a grid, that don't depend on a larger corporate infrastructure, the idea of producing your own food, all of these things are now viable in most of the United States. And so, yeah, this is why the last chapter of my book, Threshold, The Crisis of Western Civilization, the entire last chapter was devoted to, Louise and I went to Mondragon in Spain.
Yes, that's what I keep trying to tell people about.
Yeah, we spent a week there, checking it out, seeing how it worked, and that last chapter was all about that. And then we went to Madison, Wisconsin, and Peninsula Manufacturing. There's a tool and die company or a precision tool company called Peninsula there that is run as a co-op. There's the Union Cab Company, which is run as a co-op. There's a bunch of them.
Everything in Basque is on co-op. And that one other thing about the internet, about having your cities take it over, we all need to be out down to our mayors and organizing to have all our cities do that.
Yeah.
Because it exists in some places, and we just need to just all be doing that, because these people, they just think they're just going to just steamroll all over us, and we're just standing here looking.
Yeah.
We absolutely, what was the name of that book? Trumping Democracy?
Yeah, it's not a book, it's a movie, and you can watch it on Amazon, and it's called Trumping Democracy, and it's about how basically Robert and Rebecca Mercer flipped the election, and how and why, and
Yeah, I was keeping track of that. With your other little pinky, you do still have to try to fight the system and keep something sane going, because you still got to live here. But with your other 9 fingers, we need to be moving off the system.
Right.
Learn Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Build your cooperatives and your eco-villages. That's what you do.
Well, and let's add to that, Marcia, that we can still, through the power of government, in other words, through political capture, by becoming politically active, we can do things to make this easier. I mean, right now you've got Republicans who are pushing legislation to make it illegal for you to solarize your home, to make it, to support communities that want to have building codes that don't let you grow a garden in your front yard or your backyard. I mean, they're actively working against these kinds of things, and we could create the guardrails, the infrastructure, that makes these kind of things work even better. Community banking. I mean, there's lots of things that right now are largely banned by law simply to protect the interests of the rich. And so through the political process, we can change those things as well while we're building these co-ops. And there's only, I think, a half a dozen states now that even allow beneficient corporations, B corporations. We need to extend that. Marcia, brilliant stuff. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls and my thoughts on all of the above right after this. Remember a couple decades ago when National Lampoon ran the cover story the cover that had the picture of the cute little dog and the guy with a big gun, and it said, buy this magazine or we shoot the dog? I'm not going to make crazy threats like that today. This is our new dog, who has yet to be named. And she says, please help Free Speech TV. Right? Yeah, there you go. Okay. Please help Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV needs you. Here we are. This is, we went through 3 weeks and we're still 35,000 or thereabouts short. And so we're going to try and raise it as quick as we can this week, and really could use your help right now. 877-378-8669. We really need to close this thing out. We need to pay the bills. We need to get this stuff nailed down. Pick the cliche of your choice. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen today. And if not today, then tomorrow or the next day. But let's try to make this as short as possible. I'd love to get back to reading book reports, and I'm sure that you would like to get back to watching them or hearing them. So please, if you haven't contributed to Free Speech TV yet, and I know the vast majority of our viewers have not, because it's just the nature of nonprofit radio and television, whether it's free speech or whether it's NPR or something else. Except the free speech TV doesn't go begging to big corporations like NPR does. But in any case, if you'd like to make a contribution, if you can afford to make a contribution, and if you haven't already donated to Free Speech TV, or if you have, but you can afford a little bit more, please consider calling right now, 877-378-8669. We have to hit this budget for the year's end. It is the end of the year. It is tax deductible. You might want to talk to your tax people or your spouse or whatever, whoever's, organizing that kind of stuff with you, for you, about whether this is an appropriate thing to do, and if so, to what extent. But this is a great time of year to be making contributions. As we kind of settle in and look at the past year and say, okay, well, how much of this should I set aside to be tax deductible? How much should we give to charity? What kind of charities do we want to support? There's a lot of good ones out there. Free Speech TV is one of the best. Free Speech TV makes such efficient use of your contributions. With a $30 gift, you get a Free Speech TV bumper sticker. With a $60 gift, you get the Free Speech TV 16-month catalog in addition to the bumper sticker. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Ann Jones's new book, Beyond the Messy Truth. A brilliant look at the economic situation in America. With a $240 gift, or $20 a month for a year, you get Claudia Rankine's book, Citizen. And with a $360 gift, or $30 a month for a year, you get all of that stuff: the bumper sticker, the calendar, the copy of Van Jones's book, Claudia Rankine's book, and my book, Unequal Protection. With a $1,000 contribution, come to Portland or Washington, D.C., although 9 times out of 10 we're going to be in Portland. And let's get together. Let's have a nice meal. So that's it. It's quite straightforward. Free Speech TV needs your help. Free Speech TV exists, operates, continues to operate as a result of your help. This is a network that was built by its viewers. And if you're a viewer of Free Speech TV, if you find value in this program, if you find value in other programs, your contribution is also essentially a way of voting, a way of registering your approval. And one of the things that Free Speech TV looks at as they look at their lineup of programs is, because they're not a big commercial corporate network that subscribes to Nielsen ratings and things, which costs probably more than Free Speech TV pays on anybody's salary. They're not doing that. Instead, the metric that they use to determine, which shows are successful and which ones aren't is who's contributing. And it's a pretty good metric because it gives you instant feedback on, okay, these people are contributing to this show, so we better keep this show on the air. And these people aren't contributing to this show, and so, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth the time, effort, and money to keep this show on the air if we're not making the contributions? Now, I think with our show, we're doing okay. I don't think that our show is at any risk with Free Speech TV. But, look at the entire line. And, of course, when you call and make your contribution, even during our show, you can say, this is for all of Free Speech TV. I love all your programming. Or you can say, hey, that show, I like better than this one. Or this one, they actually take notes from your call. Now, just like when you're calling a member of Congress, don't call with a list of 6 things, because, that's a lot to ask somebody to write down, or even 2 things. But if you've got one good solid suggestion or complaint or critique or praise, everybody loves praise. Free Speech TV would love to hear from you. Here's your chance, 877-378-8669. Call them now and make a contribution and become part of this family. Become part of the Free Speech TV network. Become part of the Free Speech TV family. We need your help. Free Speech TV needs your help. The programs on Free Speech TV need your help. Please, call now, 877-378-8669. Let's get this fund drive over as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Terry in Chicago. Terry, what's on your mind today? Terry? Did we just lose Terry? Might be. I'm going to put Terry on hold. She's on, Terry, she or he is on line 8, Arthur. Charles in Opelika, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing today, Tom?
Good. What's up?
It's like every day I listen to your show, I learn something new. And to be honest with you, it just seems like when I was listening to John earlier, and, you know, I guess we're trying to differentiate the difference between the working class and the middle class.
Right.
And I would definitely say that race has, to me, you know, as a black man speaking, the race has something to do with it.
Yep.
You have to put that in the equation. And I would think just off the bat, just hearing working class and middle class, you would think, you know, suburban middle class people, and then you'd think of, you know, black neighborhoods, you know, still people at work. And that's the way I kind of see it. But, you know, until we build a bridge to this divide, we're not going to overcome what the billionaires are doing to us. And I think of Trump right now with this tax bill. You know, this is the plan all along with the Supreme Court. But he's getting away with so much. I'm thinking of, you know, going against Obama's foreign policy by pitting, you know, just saying that you want to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel. You got the Israelis and the Palestinians against each other. Now the Palestinians have said the United States has taken sides. They don't want us to be a broker anymore. That opens the door to Russia to actually dictate what's going to happen in Syria. And that's where we had the upper hand with the Obama administration, you know. And I just think everything that's going on right now, Trump is getting away with it, and Russia is actually going to benefit from this, just the same way they're benefiting from, you know, working with the Sudanese now.
Yeah.
And it's only happening under this administration, and we're letting them get away with murder. And to even think that they want to have a private spy, you know, spy ring or whatever that they had, that they wanted to go against the CIA.
Oh, you're talking about Trump's desire to hire Eric Prince to create a privatized CIA?
Ridiculous, man. Yeah. And this, you know, this is just undermining the U.S. government. And who's getting away with it? The 1%, because they control everything now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And the saddest part is they have these monopolies going. You have an AT&T buying up, you know, Fox companies, the movie companies or whatever. And I just see it as eventually they're going to be, of course, picking the winners and losers in this economy. You know, that's why you have so many people still out of work.
Yep.
And we got to break them up. We got to bring back Glass-Steagall. We got to bring competition back. And that's the only way I could see the stranglehold finally getting rid of it. But still, they use race as the major factor to separate us.
Yeah, agree on all points, Charles. The one thing I would add to it is the Supreme Court doctrine that rich people owning politicians. We've gone from the majority of political contributions in this country being made by, you know, in less than $2,000 increments by people who are, you know, in the top 50% of Americans, to the majority, I think it's over 40% of all political contributions in the last cycle, were made by just a few thousand people in the top 100th of 1%. We have seen a radical change in who's financing our elections as a result of these policies. So I'd add that to your screen, Charles, but with that, I completely agree. Very well said. Thank you very much. Terry in Chicago. You want to try it again, Terry? Apparently not. Okay, let's try Stephen in Deming, Washington. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for taking my call, Tom. I find myself, I think, amongst possibly a majority of people in the country, scratching my head, kind of mind-boggled, in regard to how the way that our government has operated is just gone. It has disappeared. Two things come to mind specifically. One, how is it that we have gotten to where a piece of paper, a dollar bill, has got the rights of a human being in terms of free speech, and yet it can be somehow logically determined that the internet itself is not covered by our rights to free speech. The other thing is that I think most of us are wondering is, how is it that the checks and balances that our government has operated under seem to have just disappeared? The cabinet members, as well as Trump, are basically just governing by decree, like kings and lords. And it seems that the input of Congress, the input of the public, all of the checks and balances have seemingly disappeared. And I'm wondering, how is it that they can get away with this free speech, and as well just basically, cutting NASA funds, cutting EPA funds, on and on and on. All of these things being done just by basically one person decreeing this is what it's going to be. I'd love to get your feedback on this, please.
You've identified some very real problems. The situation is that they are operating in a logical universe that says that the most important thing is wealth, that all corporations should be directed toward aggregating wealth, that wealthy people have more value than people who are not wealthy, that wealth should be determining who is in political power, wealth should be determining who has economic and business power, essentially, as it were. And wealth should determine how things like the internet are used, just like wealth has historically determined how television stations are programmed, how radio stations are programmed. Now it's going to be the internet. And I agree with you, Stephen. I think that this is wrong, and that this should not be our principal value. It has become our principal value over the last 100 years or so, in a big way since Citizens United, but in a big way since Reaganomics, I think. And we need a fundamental reimagining of the American economy, of what America is all about. We experienced this in the 1930s, when Franklin Roosevelt came along, and throughout the 1920s, it had all been about, the pioneer and the pioneer spirit and all this kind of stuff. And FDR came along and said, that's all well and good, and we're going to help, the lone farmer out there. But part of the purpose of government is to make life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness possible. And that means things like being the employer of last resort when the economy doesn't work, being the bank of last resort when the banks don't work, et cetera. Providing people with education, housing, health care, things like that. Very straightforward stuff, the GI Bill and whatnot. We have understood this in the past, and that understanding has been largely torn from us. The entire generation that came of age in the 80s with Reaganomics, and that now are, Gen X, I guess, mostly, that entire generation has been brainwashed to think that money is the be-all and end-all. And that's what we need to change. Stephen, thank you. You identified a very, very real problem. Charles in Southgate, California. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Tom, nice talking to you. How do you keep all that ADD going like that? But anyway, I'm surrounded by fires, It's like you can't deny fires, climate change, et cetera, et cetera.
You can, but you'd be dead quick, yeah.
Are we just going to, be a bad movie?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the problem with climate change, is that it doesn't all happen in the same place. It doesn't all happen in the same way. Some places get colder, places get warmer. Most places are getting warmer because it's global climate change. But then some places are getting wetter and some places are getting drier. That's the huge variable that you see. And what's happening in particular in those parts of the world where the moisture is coming directly as a result of snowmelt from glaciers, and that would be India coming off the glaciers of the Himalayas. That would be the western United States, snowmelt coming off the Cascades. Across South America, snowmelt coming off the mountains of north of Peru, of Ecuador, and I forget the Sierra Madres, that range of mountains. And so, so there's just, there's a whole...
Sucking it out of the desert sands.
Yeah, and watching our aquifers drop. I mean, we are living in a completely unsustainable way. And we've got to do something about that, Charles. We've got to do something about that as soon as possible.
Fast.
Yeah. So that did you call about arbitration too?
About the arbitration thing. I have to go to the hospital, and for all these tests and stuff, and like have to sign an arbitration, so they can do whatever they want to me. And if they mess up,
you can't sue them.
I'm duck out of luck.
Yep, absolutely right. That's the whole point of it. Is the reason why corporations embed arbitration clauses into almost everything you sign is because they know that if they do wrong, you can, under the Constitution, the 7th Amendment, you can hold them to account at law. But if they force you or if they can encourage you to give up your 7th Amendment rights.
Out of a doctor's office if you don't sign for a test.
Exactly. I mean, what are you going to do? Say to the doctor, no, I'm not going to give up my 7th Amendment rights? And they'll say, well, fine, then, find another doctor. And that's the so-called free market. It's wrong. It shouldn't be legal. It's a constitutional right. It's not a constitutional privilege. Charles, thank you for the call. Very well said. Coming up on 15 minutes before the hour, we'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back. $53 billion going to the billionaires. More on that right after this. Welcome back. Roger in El Paso, Texas. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind today?
Mr. Hartmann, how are you doing, sir?
I am well, Roger. I hope you are too.
We are doing fantastic. The reason I called is because I heard that lady talking about cooperatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I started a construction company. I'm a retired firefighter. And my wife is starting a food production business.
Mm-hmm.
Catering and blah, blah, wedding cakes, all that. And we're talking to, I started talking to plumbers, electricians about a cooperative, and they're jumping on it. They love the principle, the idea behind it.
Yeah, own your own company. It's a great way to do it.
Yes, sir. And I also studied Madragon, and where this corporation down there is just one of the most successful ones, and we're kind of basing it out. I think the origin of that, you can probably help me with this, was they closed the factory, and then they had the plumber, electrician, carpenter, cement guy got together, and they pooled their money.
Yep.
$32,000 each, and that's how they got it started.
Well, it wasn't just that. There was a priest whose name is long and complicated, and I can't remember any longer, but I have his book. In fact, it was beside my bed for years. I'm not sure where it is now. But he wrote this book about spirituality and action in an economic context, and laid out the rationale for the creation of Mondragon. And he was the guy who helped create the corporation, the nonprofit corporation in the first place. He's been dead for some time, but this was in the 1950s. I would guess...
It's also built on a philosophy of doing right for the people, not just about doing business, but doing the right thing.
Yeah, maybe I can find it for you real quickly. Hang on just a second. Let's... Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of books on Mondragon, and none of them are the one by the guy who created it, which is unfortunate. Let me see if I can, priest who founded Mondragon, if I can get all that.
Yeah. I could probably get it from my brother. My brother's kind of like you. He knows about the beginning of the earth,
Yeah.
And this guy's totally good at Googling stuff and getting information.
Yeah, here we are. It's... This was started in history. Here we go. Jose Maria Arizmendiartierra. Arizmendiartierra. Arizmendiarrieta is his last name.
Got you fast.
Yeah.
A-R-I-Z?
Yeah, A-R-I-Z-M-E-N-D-I-A-R-R-I-E-T-A. Jose Maria Arizmendi, however you say it.
It'd be hard for anybody.
Yeah.
In fact, a Spanish professor would have difficulty.
Yeah, now you know why I couldn't remember it. But that was 1955.
That is beautiful history. Yeah.
That was 1955, and he brought 5 people in. They started a company called Talares Ulgor, which was an acronym derived from a whole bunch of local towns. And over the first 15 years, they created all these co-ops. That was from 55 to 69 actually, and then the first local group there. But Mondragon is insanely successful. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They are the largest nonprofit corporation in the world. They've got branches all over the world. It is so worth the effort of going to the town of Mondragon, which means Mount of the Dragon, by the way. It's a mountain nearby that oversees the area. That's the name. Going to visit it or just reading about it. I mean, it's just amazing, amazing history. So thanks a lot for the call, Roger. Great to hear from you. And thanks for listening to Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Jerry in Camden, New Jersey. Hey, Jerry, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. My name's Joe.
Oh, Joe. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Great big fan. A long time. With Donald Trump, I have a question for you.
Okay.
From all his massive takeovers of our government institutions, with a massive military budget, are we experiencing a coup d'etat? And if not, what would a coup d'etat look like?
Well, typically a coup d'etat, an overthrow of government is done by the military. That's what people usually expect.
Donald Trump funded the military beyond belief here?
Yeah, but the military is not asserting their authority. I would argue that the military defense contractors are the ones asserting their authority, not the military. If we are in a coup, and I think I could build a case that we are, Jerry, that coup began in 1971 when the plot began, which was when Lewis Powell wrote the infamous Powell memo to Eugene Sindor, his neighbor and the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and in which he said, we need to start these think tanks in order to get our ideas out there, in order to change the public's perception of how government is supposed to run and what the purpose of government is, so that everybody will think that rich people are the cat's meow, and everybody will trash poor people, and corporations can have political power. That then led directly to 1976 when Lewis Powell had been put on the Supreme Court in 72 by Richard Nixon. In 76, he authored the Buckley versus Vallejo decision, in which he said that if a wealthy person, if a billionaire or a multimillionaire or a very, very wealthy corporation wants to completely own a politician, if they want to go in and say, okay, Paul Ryan is now ours, we're the ones who own him, they can do that. It's perfectly legal. It's considered First Amendment free speech.
That was treason come in, Tom.
I agree, and that was the beginning of the coup by the rich, the modern era coup. Was 76, the Buckley decision. It was put on steroids in 2010. And by the way, the Buckley decision overturned a whole bunch of get money out of politics protections that were put into law in 1973 after the Nixon scandals, overturned a whole bunch of them. So then that led to the 2010 Citizens United decision, which amplified Buckley and said, yes, absolutely, rich people and corporations and even foreigners, even people who are not Americans, can own American politicians, can own American think tanks, can own American media, can influence public opinion as long as they have the money. So to the extent that you could say that we have been taken over by big money, I would absolutely agree. Whether that qualifies as a coup or not, by the definitions of political scientists, I'd leave that to the political scientists. But as a talk show host, I'm down with that totally. Jerry, thank you. Very well said. Norm in Varna, Illinois. Hey, Norm, what's on your mind?
My goodness. Thank you, Tom, for your wonderful programming. And to kind of continue on your riff that you were going on, the Betsy DeVos family is the family that backed the Citizens United push in the United States Supreme Court.
Really?
Oh,
they funded what's his name? Who's Bossy? What's his name? Sean? What's the first name of the guy? David Bossy. Yeah, who's the CEO of.
That was the family.
That was the DeVos family.
That was the DeVos family. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Not surprising, but amazing.
Oh, but I've been a long-time listener, first-time caller. Finally got on through, and I want to thank you and your family and your staff for all the fantastic information that I've gotten over the years. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and Happy Holidays to all you guys.
Great. Thank you very much, Norm. Back at you. Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah, whatever may be appropriate for you too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, I'm an old-time, about your age, truck driver. I've been driving ever since 1973 when I was 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
And,
you've seen a lot of changes.
I'm proud of the T-shirt that I wear that says I voted for Obama 3 times. I'm a good old boy from Illinois. He was my senator before he was our president.
Yep. Yep. There you go.
But anyhow, I heard this rant from this lady about the LBJ quote, and my thing is it's all about divide and conquer. And the flim-flam people of this world have been playing us for fools, for suckers, for thousands of years. Race against race, nation against nation, divide and conquer. And that was my riff that I wanted to just get on in there. And the other thing is, there was a lady that was on there that was a 7-day Adventist that was homeless. And my name is Norm at freenetco.com. I might be able to give her some guidance. And thank you again. God bless you, and Happy Christmas. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's, buddy.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Norm. Nice to hear from you. And your first call was a great success. Thank you very much. Oh my, we're gonna hit the end of the show here in 15 seconds, so it wouldn't be fair to put another caller on. But I got to tell you, this tax scam, they're going to vote on this thing in the next day or 2 or 3. You need to be calling your representative and your 2 senators and saying no. It's 202-224-13. Is it 1315? No, I've got to memorize that number or write it down someplace. Anyhow, it's easy enough to find. Oh, callcongress.org has all the phone numbers on it. Callcongress.org. Get the phone number for your senator, for your representatives. Call them now and make it very clear to them that you're not all that excited and enthusiastic about this tax scam going on. Because that's what it is. I mentioned $53 billion. $53 billion going to the top 1%. Why or how? By kneecapping the Affordable Care Act. They're literally taking health care away from, or creating the situation where 12, 13, 14 million Americans will no longer have health care under the Affordable Care Act, under Obamacare. And that is going to free up $53 billion that the Republicans can hand off to the morbidly rich. Hashtag morbidly rich, by the way. Everywhere you go, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, hashtag morbidly rich. Let's get this meme going. But the morbidly rich they're like taking everything. And it's just fundamentally wrong. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us today. Tomorrow, another fascinating day. Stick around. More to come tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.